Welcome to Technado.
Welcome to another thrilling episode of Technado. We will laugh, we will cry, we will learn things. I'm your host, Sophie. I don't really have much else to say other than that I'm your host, Sophie, and I'm ready to have a great time. And I'm here, of course, with Daniel Lowry and Mr. Don Pizzette. How y'all doing today?
Hey, I am doing really well. I think so. You're happy and excited. So you're going to take the laughing. I'm going to take the crying part, and then we'll have to.
I'm going to learn something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You have to learn something. I wonder what that'll be. But
well, that's going to be a struggle for me.
So we do have a lot of really good articles this week that cover the breadth of tech news, which is always a good time. I don't know about crying. No, I think we've got some stuff that would qualify for crying. So we'll see.
I was just saying things to say things, and he's analyzing it. So I'm glad you're here to do that.
Well, that's what we do here at Technado. We like to analyze everything we can at all possible. I'm analyzing the fire in my mouth. My wife bought me some beef sticks as snacks for, when I'm getting a little hungry, a little peckish, and I grabbed one. I didn't realize I said hot, and I thought, okay, I have a pretty high tolerance for heat things when it comes to food. It was blanking hot. It was like ghost pepper stick.
This could have been the crying part.
Right.
We could have. What's that? The interview show where they eat the hot ones?
Hot ones?
Hot ones, yeah.
We could do that on Technado.
It was
sticks.
damned spicy. I'm not going to lie.
Well, I'm glad you survived.
I did.
And that you're here with us. That's great. We have, like you said, we got some interesting stuff that happened this week in tech. So we're going to jump right in. This first one comes to us from Tom's Hardware. Asus, as I learned that it's pronounced, Asus ROG X670EI has a chipset on a PCIe stick, which is a pretty long title, but I'm sure you guys will break it down. Basically, the motherboard, I guess, for this, for AMD Ryzen 7000 series processors, places the second chipset chip on an add-on PCIe card. So, with all of that said, why do I care?
All right, so you will hear from time to time about how technology goes full circle, right? And there's nowhere better to see that than the old, like we had mainframes, where you had a central computer that was really beefy, and then you had all these dummy terminals that were just clients, right? And then we switched to distributed computing, where everybody had their own computer with their own general purpose CPU and so on. And now, thanks to the cloud and web-based services, we're going back to that model where everything is done in a central data center and our computers are just web browsers, right? We've gone full circle. Well, we're starting to see that with motherboards in a pretty bizarre way. And I don't know how it was for you guys when you got started and got your first computer, but when I started, your motherboard usually had like ISA slots, and your motherboard did not have a hard drive controller or a graphics controller on the motherboard. You had to have cards for that. So if you wanted if you wanted IDE hard drives, you had to get an IDE hard drive controller. Or if you wanted SCSI hard drives, you had to get a SCSI hard drive controller.
Are the slots still color coded like they used to be? Like the ISA was black and then the PCIe was brown, or PCI was brown.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I have no idea how they pick these colors.
Right,
Couldn't go with blue and red or something. It's gonna be brown. So anyhow, over the years, motherboards have become a lot more dense thanks to micro components, and so now almost every motherboard has a graphics controller, has hard drive or storage controllers that are on it, USB controllers, all sorts of stuff built into the chipset on the motherboard. Well, Asus is bringing us full circle and reintroducing the idea of a chipset on a card. And what's driving this, because when I first looked at it, I said, well, that's dumb. Why would I do that? Let me give you
That's dumb.
Let me give you the reasoning why I think it's dumb.
Sophia's question of why should I care? You're really not going for that.
I'm reinforcing.
You shouldn't.
So my first thought was, all right, the chipset on the motherboard is awesome because it's got direct lanes into the processor and RAM and all that other stuff. Once you stick it on a card, now it's limited to the bandwidth of that one PCIe slot, right? So you've limited the bandwidth. But I don't know if you've noticed this, but like on desktop computers, you don't normally see a lot of USB-C ports.
That's true.
Right? You get a laptop, you might have 4 USB-C ports, but on a desktop, you're lucky to get 1. And it's usually because of bus bandwidth constraints. And so the idea here is not to stick your hard drives and all sorts of other things on this chipset, but if you want additional USB ports, if you want additional peripherals of some sort, that this card can kind of support it. So it is just interesting to see technology go full circle, and now we're back to controllers on an add-in board.
Yeah, that's it is kind of funny how all things old are new again, right? And I remember when these like little dummy terminals started coming out. It was probably like 9-10 years ago now, where it was like, hey, because the idea was we can put these dumb terminals on the desk, they get a virtual desktop, right? And that way, when the user will screw this up, we just tell them reboot. Right. And now not only does the reboot usually fix weird things, problems with your computer, but now it's actually fixing everything because you're getting a brand new desktop environment. Mm-hmm. It just reaches out. So it was like, oh, this is interesting. Isn't this just like we used to do? Well, okay, I guess that was still a good idea. What made us go away from, like, why did we start doing distributed computing? Why did we get away from that mainframe thing?
So part of it was the internet, right? That you could push off processing power on your clients. Right. So that was a part of it. The other part was that people started writing. What they wanted to do is they wanted to write custom software, and writing custom software on a mainframe was really difficult. Pushing graphics, right? The mainframe stuff was all text-based.
So we wanted to have that more immersive experience.
Yes.
And having our own computing power made that happen.
Yep. And so that's when distributed computing started to grow. And you ended up in the client-server model where we're in now, where you might be running a Mac or Windows or whatever with a full GUI that's running locally, even though you're rendering stuff that's coming from a server remote.
It's fun.
It sounds fun.
I mean, this was a highly technical article, so if you're really interested in the specifications behind all this stuff, this article has it.
There are a lot of specifications.
In spades.
Definitely. When I first was reading through this, I did poke my head over my desk and I was just like, hey, I'm getting caught up on the acronyms and everything of it. And so it's nice to have Daniel right there to kind of be like, all right, I'll translate it into layman's terms for you because
I give her wrong information on purpose.
Yeah, say exactly this. Don't deviate from that. We won't laugh at you, I promise.
And Daniel, you mentioned that was a couple episodes ago that like you used to build your own computers, but you really don't anymore.
Oh no. And ain't nobody got no time for that.
And I still do. And I'm actually almost due for an upgrade at home.
Oh yeah.
So I've been kind of paying attention to components and stuff that are out there, and
most
things haven't changed much, right? So you're just like, if I bought version 2 before, I'll buy version 4 now, and that's that. But there are a few advancements that are on the horizons where hardware is really making some leaps.
Oh, well, I'll be interested in seeing. I mean, it is interesting stuff to kind of like to see how it continues to evolve and grow, and speeds continue to move up. And it used to be really exciting back in the day when you first get started because it's something you can really get your hands on, right? It's something that anybody can. There's no the ticket price to entry is how much money you have in your wallet and what can you buy.
Yeah.
And PC components, while can be a bit expensive, not that big of an investment. And then you get to do something, you have experience with it. That's what I liked about it. And I think that's what draws a lot of people into it initially, into hardware. But then, like you say, it's kind of a, if you're into things that have a lot of modularity, it can be a real like, yay, because I can now like, oh, these specs are just a little bit different than these specs. And now which one do I make a decision on? That kind of thing can absolutely grab my attention.
Sophie, have you ever built a computer?
I know people that have. Does that count? My brother, my older brother's into that. He has sent me pictures before, like, I just built my new computer, and I'm like, holy cow. It's like he does all the fancy stuff and everything. I've never built one myself, but I have been witness to it. So
well, we got to remedy that.
Maybe we should incorporate that into the podcast.
Yeah, we should do an episode, and we'll call it Sophie's Build. Sophie's Choice.
Comes out looking like crap. Yeah.
Or, because I need to upgrade mine at home.
Yeah.
So I could come
Get
up
the components.
with specs.
Yeah.
And then make her put it together, and if she breaks anything, I can make sure she never hears the end of it.
That's
just take it out of my paycheck.
Yeah. I like this idea.
You will either gain viewers or you will lose a lot of viewers. So play roulette with your podcast there. So again, like you said, a lot of specs in that article. So if you do want some more of that, I'm not going to read it again. So you can go to Tom's Hardware and check that out. But switching gears a little bit, we've got another article here from The Register. Microsoft switches Edge's PDF reader to pay-to-play Adobe Acrobat. I thought, maybe I'm wrong, to me it seemed, the headline seemed a little bit misleading because I went through and read it, and it says that there are a lot of functions like the read-aloud narration and stuff that'll be free for Windows 10 and 11 users, but there's other advanced features, and those are the ones that come at a cost.
Right. This one, I'm kind of torn on this one. I have a love-hate relationship with Adobe, which I think everyone
most people
does.
do.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's super excited about Adobe all the time. Their Acrobat software over the years has had so many just outrageous security flaws that it's difficult to have a positive opinion of them. And back when they had Flash, what was originally Macromedia Flash and then Adobe Flash, that was even worse, right? Just tons of gaping security holes in it left and right. So most of us kind of got a bad taste in our mouth. And here, I'll share a true story with you. I used to live in Seattle, and I lived like 1 block away from Adobe's headquarters in Seattle. Their actual headquarters is in California, but they had a building there in Seattle. And so when we take the dog out for a walk, we always made sure to walk by Adobe's
and throw the double birds up at it. Spit at the front door.
In a nice grassy area. It was perfect for the dog.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but I will say that I've gotten really frustrated with PDF functionality in browsers. So Chrome has its own PDF reader, Edge has its own PDF reader, which is different. Apple has their own PDF reader, and they're not all created equal. There's features that aren't there, and it's frustrating. And so I've gotten to where I disable the PDF reader in the browser, and I actually do use Adobe Acrobat. I used like Foxit for a while, but that company is a little strange, and so started using actually Adobe Acrobat Reader. So to have it incorporated in the browser, to me, that's like, well, all right, I'm already using it outside. Now it's inside. I'm okay with that. But if you're one of those people who is staunchly against using Adobe software, this is a frustration point because you have to figure out how to disable it.
Yeah, it's real easy. You install Firefox, and you're good to go.
And they have their own PDF reader?
Yeah, I believe so.
And
like it reads PDFs. I'm assuming that it is their build. I'm not using Acrobat at this point. But.
Is Firefox your daily driver?
It is.
So
we check.
Because you were using Brave for a while.
So yeah, I'm using Brave right now, but I do have Firefox.
You do use Firefox a lot in like shows.
I use Firefox for the most part for just like, if I'm doing hacky stuff.
Okay.
Right, so I use it a
because
lot.
Like Grease Monkey scripts and things like that?
Yeah, or like just all the plugin stuff that you can do for it and the way that it works. It's, to me, is so much easier to like work with as far as their developer tools. And yeah, there's a lot of add-ons that you can throw on this thing. Not that Chrome doesn't have that either, but Chrome has historically had a bunch of, what's the word? It uses a lot of resources.
It certainly does.
Right?
It's a memory hog.
Yeah, it's a super memory hog. And I've been using Firefox since like, 2005, 6, somewhere in there. So it's just been my daily driver. And then when I got into the security world, I realized that most people in security for doing hacking stuff use Firefox. Like when you download Kali and install it, it does not come with a Chromium browser. It comes with Firefox. And they use Firefox.
That is true.
And probably because it has a bunch of that stuff, that legacy of like Grease Monkey and whatnot, and being used by hackers and stuff that has continued that legacy, and that's kind of like their thing. But yeah, so I know it's got all my bookmarks and everything, and I can export it. So I use Brave for like browsing stuff, and searching, doing Google, searching stuff. I don't use Google all the time, but I do sometimes. I like the privacy that it involves in that, but yeah, I use both.
Well, I know I use Edge pretty religiously at this point. I don't use many other browsers because I just like when I have an open tab on one system, I can access it on another, and some of that's really convenient. But right now, I just have the 6 articles from this episode open and it's idling, and Edge is consuming 1.3 gigs of RAM, which seems a little excessive.
Yeah, it does.
When you look at browsers of old, and it's even eating a little GPU and CPU just sitting here idle, which is interesting. But yeah, so on the Adobe side, I don't know, Daniel, from your security perspective, is Adobe Acrobat Reader, like, do you view that as a plague, or are you comfortable with Acrobat Reader?
So, it has historically had a bunch of security issues, right? I mean, are we seeing that now? That makes me want to do something like do a little test here. Let's go to exploit-DB. Exploits-DB.
Oh boy, I love when we
right?
do that.
This is a little
hose up
live.
his laptop on the show.
Yeah. Let's get in here and let's just look up Adobe. D-O-B-E. Bam. And let's see here. 22. The last exploit for Adobe anything was last year. This time last year. That they have reported. Right? Yeah, because it usually goes in date order. Let me make sure it's like date order descending. Yeah. 2/23/2022 was the last something that
I would
like,
not have guessed that.
So LDAP Java Object Deserialization Remote Code Execution RCE for Adobe ColdFusion 11. Here's one for ColdFusion 8, Adobe Connect 10, Adobe Reader DC was 2019.
All right.
So not that they don't have like CVEs and stuff that are involved, but if there's like a proof of concept that's out there in the wild, that will most likely be on ExploitDB or Vulners or another one of those sites that if I needed to actually exploit this, how would I do it? I would look this up and see, hey, do you have software? Is there a script I can run? Is there a proof of concept code that I can mangle and make use to what I'm going to do? And the last one they got on ExploitDB was of last year.
All right. So just for Adobe Acrobat Reader, I went on MITRE.
Yeah.
And there are 17 CVEs in January and February of this year. So in 6 weeks.
But is there any kind of proof of concept code?
That would require me doing research. And
like it's one thing to have a CVE. It's one thing. It's another thing for it to actually be exploitable.
No. See, we count as media, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think we have to do that level of research.
Right?
I think we can blow this up right here. Like if you're running Adobe Acrobat right now, your
totally
life is in danger.
That's right. Like
your family.
You need to find a
already
safe
be dead.
space immediately.
Sophie, you running Acrobat over there?
You sound like a real journalist right now. This is great.
By the way, I looked up Firefox has a built-in PDF viewer. That's what it says.
Oh.
Built-in, even better, Firefox PDF viewer comes enabled by default, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't say that it's using Adobe Acrobat.
I don't know much about the Acrobat engine type stuff. Like with web rendering, you've got WebKit and what are all the names, right, that they've got for the actual rendering engine behind the scenes? I forgot Google Chrome's, but Firefox has its own. I think it's called Gecko, right?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, you ever look at like browser?
Yeah, and it's got the Gecko.
So Gecko is their HTML renderer.
Gotcha.
And WebKit is the one that
For
Apple uses.
Yeah.
And then Google forked WebKit and made, I think it's called Blink. So Blink, Gecko, and WebKit. And so if you run a browser, the browser itself really doesn't matter. That's just bookmarks and sync and the buttons you see on the screen. But the HTML renderer in the back end is what really matters. And that's what's so different between each one and why web pages render different.
Yeah.
So I wonder on the Adobe side, is it the same thing? Like, does Firefox have its own rendering engine?
Gotcha.
Edge has its own rendering engine. And so now
they're just plugging in Adobe.
If Microsoft is just plugging in Adobe, then they would have the most accurate rendering engine, you'd think.
Interesting.
And we'll have to learn more.
Yeah. Oh. Here's the thing, man. It doesn't matter what software it's at. You can look up any software, they're going to have a CVE. And probably something relatively recent if they are an updated software, like something that is maintained. Right?
That's a good qualifier to add.
If it stopped being maintained 6 years ago.
Windows 3.1 hasn't had a CVE this year.
0 CVEs.
It's the most secure operating system.
Well, nobody's perfect, so that does not surprise me. So
how did this become a security thing?
I don't know.
Why don't we do security later?
So we did jump into it.
It did say in there, it talked a little bit about like some advanced security stuff that it's also going to include. The subtitle of it said, yeah, sure, totally secure. And I was like, that sounds sarcastic to me. But I went through and read it, and it seemed like it was like, no, actually it is. This is great. It's
right. I mean, we're not seeing a bunch of like data breaches for companies because they went through their Adobe Acrobat Reader browser exploit. So,
yeah, it was my fault because I was thinking of what are the reasons why people hate Adobe, and there's usually two reasons, right? One, it's expensive, and two, it's insecure. But we can see that apparently they've made some great strides there.
Yeah, right.
Not on the price.
They have taken the path to redemption.
Good for them. I'm happy for them. Well, sticking with with Microsoft Edge and that sort of theme, Microsoft is going to forcibly remove Internet Explorer from most Windows 10 PCs. This is from Ars Technica. Now, this is from earlier this week, but I've been seeing memes about Internet Explorer for years, and it just seems like it refuses to die. I think security updates stop. I'm nothing against Internet Explorer. It's just I've been hearing about that for a long time.
It's the Black Knight of Monty Python, right? Yeah.
Security updates for Internet Explorer, it looks like, stopped last year, but as of, I think it was Valentine's Day, Microsoft is fully disabling Internet Explorer in most versions of Windows 10. So for the 7 people that still use Internet Explorer, what does that mean for them?
All right, so two significant takeaways from this, right? So one is that IE11 is dead. We covered that weeks or months ago. But now it's like super dead.
But its zombie corpse continues to feed on the flesh of the living.
But the second thing that we take away from it, though, which is probably the more important thing, which is Microsoft is actively reaching out and doing something about it. It's not like in the past where if you want to sit down right now and install Windows XP on your computer, you can do it. Right? Yeah, you'll have some driver issues, but you can do it. You can install Windows XP. And if you want to run IE6, which it comes with, or install IE7 or 8, you can do it. You're going to run into some certificate expiration issues, but you can do it. Well, with IE11, Microsoft is saying you can't do it. If you connect to the internet, the next time you do a Windows update, it's going to reach out and snag it and disable it and remove it from your system, forcing you over to Edge. Now, honestly, you should have gone to Edge already. But I do think that it's interesting that they're reaching out and denying access to the package. Now, at first, I was like, man, can they do that? If they sell you an OS with certain things on it, can they actually take away? But IE11 was never part of a gold image. Right. So it was never part of an install. It was something that you always had to download from Microsoft. So they can take it away. And that's what they're doing. And it is a good thing in this particular scenario, but it does show the power that a lot of these operating system manufacturers have over our systems, that you may own your computer and own the operating system that's running on it, but they can still reach out and yank something off of it.
So, Don, I want to verify some of my presuppositions about this. And obviously...
No, we're media. We don't verify presuppositions. We just go.
I know, it's very out of character for media personalities to do this type of fact-checking. But are they doing it because IE11 is a security issue?
So it is, because it's not actively being supported. Right. But I think the other challenge is that, remember the rendering engines that I was just talking about? Well, with IE11, it's a different rendering engine than what Edge uses. And when Edge first launched, it was using the same engine, but Edge switched to that Chromium engine, so it's based on Google Chrome now. So it's like having an alternate dimension that you're trying to support.
Well, my question becomes is, why is Microsoft the arbiter of what I get to have on my computer? Like, okay, so you don't like it because now you have to support, developers are out there going, well, I have to support IE11 because it's still around, right? Well, you have to support Firefox too because it's still around. Are you going to now start deleting Firefox? It's like, well, no, we will be a Chromium-based world, and that's how it will be. Is that the next logical step of Microsoft, is to say, I don't want the world to support multiple browser engines?
It could be.
That's scary as hell right there. I do not like that answer.
There is one redeeming thing, I guess, here is that
Linux is still a thing?
Linux is still a thing. But you also have IE11 compatibility mode in Edge.
Right.
So if there's something that you need that's tied to IE11, they've kind of given you a way.
That's not my problem, though. My problem is they are making that decision for you.
Yes.
And that is where I have issue.
And, I kind of wonder, do you have issue with it because this is the first time Microsoft's getting in your face about it? Or because, like, Apple does this every day of the week. Like, Apple constantly pulls things.
Well, yeah, I hadn't, honestly, this is the first time I'm hearing that my operating system vendor is dictating to me what I can and cannot have on my system.
Yeah.
So, which is why I run Linux.
It does say for the few people, the tens of people around the world that are still running Internet Explorer, Edge is going to automatically transfer over any bookmarks and browsing data that they have. But if you try to open Internet Explorer, launch it, it's going to automatically open Edge instead. So you won't even have a choice.
Yeah, that's like someone telling me I can't have, I don't know, like a gas stove in my house.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying I'm going to.
That would never happen.
Yeah, because that's just ridiculous.
I think it's funny that it does end the article we were talking about, like, it refuses to die.
Yeah.
It says it could be nearly a decade before the zombified corpse of Internet Explorer finally stops.
Did they actually steal my line?
That is what it says, the very last
funny.
line, yeah. So you're not wrong. You're not incorrect.
There was actually a couple of people bringing attention to, I don't know if any of you guys have upgraded Windows 10 to Windows 11.
I have, yeah.
Super easy, right?
Yeah, it was a button click, yeah.
And you get a message that says, hey, your computer's ready to go. If you meet the requirements, you have health check installed and all that, and you can just hit upgrade. Well, they actually changed that dialogue so it looks different now. Because it used to have where you could accept or decline or whatever. So
Right.
you could choose not to do it. I want to stay on Windows 10. Now the buttons say accept or postpone. And people are saying, wait a minute, you're giving us 2 yes buttons. And so
Right.
it's not like a yes and no. It's
Yeah.
yes and yes. There's 2 different yeses. And they've kind of hidden the cancel link down at the bottom. So it's the whole dark pattern thing you hear about.
Yeah.
We're seeing more of that.
That's fun.
So fun. Well, that was a very cheery end to that segment. So that's going to do it, I think, for our tech news for today. But stick around. We will be right back with more security news after this. A lot has been changing behind the scenes here, and we cannot wait to catch up with you in person at the MSP Expo in Fort Lauderdale from February 14th to 17th. The products you know and love, IT Pro TV, Audit Pro TV, and Practice Labs, are now training the modern workforce together as ACI Learning. Stop and see us at booth number 753 to see our shows on the big screens, to play our popular Lock and Key game, where you'll get a chance to win a pair of Bose headphones and other prizes, and most importantly, to meet our very own Ronnie Wong. Considered a subject matter expert in Cisco and with 11 tech certifications, Ronnie's an experienced IT pro edutainer. He can't wait to meet our learners in person. Welcome back for more Technado. We're going to jump into our security news. During the break, we had a riveting discussion about Bad Boys and Pulp Fiction and all things. So that was great. So I'm ready.
Ixnay on the old fiction fay.
I am ready to jump back into some news here. So we have an article here. This one is, I think this literally just happened yesterday or today. It's very recent. It says, patch now, Apple's iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and Safari under attack with new zero-day flaw. So this is from the Hacker News. They did roll out security updates to address a flaw that it said has been actively exploited in the wild. So I updated my phone. I don't have any other Apple devices, so I think I'm good. But what exactly was at risk? What kind of flaw are we talking about?
So I unintentionally have created a theme for this episode, I think, because this is it's a flaw in the WebKit rendering engine. Yeah. And Apple did something interesting years ago. Actually, I forget how long it's been now, where they said, we want a common rendering engine across all of our platforms. So Safari on macOS and Safari, actually every web browser on the iPhone. Do you guys know about that? The shady stuff that Apple pulls on the iPhone?
I don't have one.
Okay. So let's back up before I dive into this one a little bit. Apple, now I have to kind of level set with everybody. I totally have an iPhone. I use an iPhone. I have
Full
an
disclosure.
iPad. So I'm not an Apple hater. I use the devices. And I would have a hard time switching back to Android at this point, although I've used Android phones over the years too.
But you're about to chuck some serious shade on Apple right now.
Yeah, so Apple got in front of Congress a couple of years ago, like when Tim Apple was up there testifying in front of Congress, and they said, they were getting him on anti-competitive practices, and he said there is absolutely nothing that we prevent other web browsers from doing on our iOS platform. So Safari doesn't have an advantage over anybody else because we let them use the same features we use. And that is 100% not true. He straight up lied to Congress, because what they did is they said, look, anybody can release a web browser on iOS, but they have to use the WebKit rendering engine. And so that's why you'll see web browsers where they have like a Windows and a Linux version, they'll have an Android version and no iOS version. Or like with Chrome, they have an iOS version, but no plugins and extensions. And it's because they're forced to use a different rendering engine, which breaks all the plugins and extensions. And then Apple won't allow them to do plugins and extensions because that changes the way the application works. So they deny it in their approval process. So Apple 100% denies them the ability to do something that Safari can do. You can get extensions and plugins for Safari all day long.
That's funny.
Not for other browsers, right? So with all that out in the open, obviously some shady practices there, Apple did kind of have a good idea of, let's get this WebKit engine to be the renderer on the desktop and their mobile devices so web pages look the same across the board. Well, on a positive, web pages look the same across the board. On a negative, when there's a security flaw, it literally hits every one of their products. Like this hurt everything except the Apple TV, which actually does use WebKit. I wonder if the article just left that out. That's got to be in there. Yeah. I think maybe the Apple Watch is unaffected.
You have multiple times in this episode, Don, have noted about the verification integrity of media.
That's right.
So
we're scot-free.
That's right.
So this makes it a big deal, right? Because you might have a highly secure operating system like iOS. iOS is really secure. macOS is secure, but not as much. But this vulnerability jumps the boundaries because it's affecting WebKit, and this one is being exploited in the wild. So it's one of those times where we absolutely need to make sure that our machines are getting patched.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just like you got software that you're making, you're gonna find vulnerabilities, and that is exactly what has happened. Good news was it does look like it was security researchers that discovered this. Unfortunately, it does seem like they weren't the first, right? Because this has been actively being, as Sophia said, exploited in the wild in some cases. So, and to your effect as well, it doesn't matter whether you were running Chromium-based browser or whatever. They're using that WebKit, so it's hitting everything. All you have to do, I say all you have to do, like it's just as simple as a point-and-click kind of thing. But the way they were doing it is through attacking you through your browser, because that's where these vulnerabilities were lying. And since we use browsers all day long, this is kind of a big deal.
Yep. Now, I do kind of have a bit of a theory here that this one maybe isn't that bad.
Yeah.
It's exploiting temporary files. Permissions are set wrong. It allows one application to possibly view data from other applications, so jumping the sandbox that Apple enforces. But one of the reasons why I think this one might not be so bad, and I don't have a lot of facts to back this up, which is not going to stop us, but I am going to show
Hasn't before. Why should we start now?
So this was reported by Shinru Chi of Pangu Lab. And have you guys heard of Pangu Lab?
It does sound familiar, but I can't remember where I've heard it or seen it.
Pangu, for many years, put out a jailbreak kit for the iPhone. If you wanted to jailbreak your iPhone, or I think iPad
That's
as well.
probably where I heard it then.
That you could get one of their utilities, and it would allow you to jailbreak it, and then you could put Cydia and all that other stuff on there and go crazy. Completely undermine the security of the platform. Like once you jailbreak your iPhone, you were just like in the danger zone. So that's not a good idea. But that's what they did. Now that tells me if this exploit could be used to completely subvert the security framework on the iPhone, I'm pretty sure they would have leveraged it for that. But since they disclosed it to Apple, to me, what that's telling me is they felt that getting the bounty dollars from Apple was worth more than whatever they could have used it for outside of it. But apparently they worked with Apple directly, and Google Project Zero also got involved. But yeah, just seeing that Pangu Lab reported it, that tells me that this wasn't like super high level. This isn't like a 10 out of 10 security risk.
Right.
It's more of probably like a 5 out of 10 where potentially an application.
I would say that to me, when I hear about Apple security being breached or the possibility of it being breached, it's probably not so bad for Jane and Joe Schmo out there that run a MacBook or have an iPhone. It's people that are actively being targeted, so journalists in certain areas of the world, and that kind of stuff. That's where the danger comes from.
Activists.
And the people that are going after them have the resources to take advantage of these types of attacks. So that's why it's super important to get this stuff out there.
If it's a drive-by attack, they hit a web page, and the exploit in WebKit allows them to access email attachments or signal communications, which are encrypted in transit but not necessarily on the device itself.
Right.
That could really be damaging.
Yep. So if you got an iPhone or another iOS device, I would highly recommend getting updates.
Yep, and I don't think we said the version numbers of what is fixed, right? So on the desktop side, you need to be on 13.2.1. On the mobile side, it's 16.3.1. And when I say mobile, that's iOS, iPadOS, and I have to imagine the Apple TV is involved.
I mean, if it's using the WebKit,
the tvOS,
it's got to be.
And then they mentioned just Safari 16.3.1. I'm not sure why they call it out specifically.
That is
because they don't do the Windows distro anymore. But anyhow, there you go. 16.3.1 or 13.2.1.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
No.
Real quick? Well, I'm gonna ask anyway. You can fire me later. So the one that you were talking about that was reported by Pangu Lab, it looks like maybe that was a different issue. There was one mentioned earlier in the article that said it was an anonymous researcher that reported it, but that was the one I was going to ask about. It says it relates to a type confusion bug in the WebKit browser engine that could be activated when processing maliciously crafted web content, culminating in arbitrary code execution. And it looks like it was a different vulnerability. So that was the one that I was like, so what?
There were a couple of different vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
One was a use after free. This was a type confusion.
And the use after free, that was the one that Pengu reported. The other one, I don't remember its name. But anyhow, I think Daniel's mentioned this before, where the really sophisticated attacks that are happening today usually leverage more than one exploit.
Right.
And what's that called? When
Exploit chaining.
There we go.
Yeah.
And so you end up with like a tag team. That's what makes it so hard to protect from this stuff, because you might look at one individually and it's not that bad, but then when you stick it together with something else, all of a sudden it becomes a nightmare.
Yeah, full compromise.
Okay. I was just wondering because it was I am still learning a lot about this stuff, so I'm looking and I'm like, well, maybe they're the same, and I'm just not picking up on that. So, but yeah, they covered a couple different issues. But bottom line, should be patched if you go and update your stuff. So just,
I mean, honestly, you got a device. It doesn't matter. Like, these things happen. You should be patching your device like as soon as you get the, hey, we have an update ready, install it.
Yeah.
Like find some free time in your day and go, this is happening today.
I know a lot of people that won't update, especially like the Apple stuff, because sometimes there's bugs and stuff with the updates, or like it changes the way your iPhone works or whatever, especially if you have like an older phone, I guess. So I know people that'll be like, no, I'm not updating. They just want to make my phone obsolete.
Cool.
I'm, like, okay.
I'm going to send you this web link. Go there.
I understand your frustration, but please just update it. I don't want you to be a victim. So so that's going to be it for that article. This next article, it just don't make no sense. Did it work? It didn't go. Oh man. Comedic timing would have been great.
It make no sense. It make no sense. No, it make no sense. What you talking about, Willis?
I got to get violent with the iPad when I press the button to trigger the noise. I wasn't violent enough.
It probably hasn't been patched.
Yeah.
That's probably why.
It's been
Somebody is attacking
completely.
me right now as we speak. I'm feeling very attacked. So this article comes from The Verge. Is that Wyze? Is that how you pronounce
Wyze,
that?
yep.
So Wyze's security cameras and home monitoring services will go offline tonight for 2 hours. Now this was, I think, on the 8th, February 8th that this happened.
Yep.
My first instinct, I know it's important to, like, if you're using security cameras from this company, it would be good to know. But my first thought, my like Law and Order brain went, criminals could use this information to time their attack for when these cameras are not active. So was that a concern?
Absolutely. And, I don't use Wyze cameras. And so I
Not since February 8th.
So they have had some security vulnerabilities over the years. And I've actually looked at their cameras. If you haven't heard of them, they are a very budget-friendly brand. And if you go like on Amazon, they are Amazon's recommended purchase or whatever, because for usually under $30, you can get a Wi-Fi enabled security camera in your home. And you can pay a bit extra for their cloud service to have recording, and also like for just a few $100, you can deck out your whole house with Wyze stuff, and that makes it attractive to a lot of consumers that are out there. But I see it a surprising amount in data centers and other locations where somebody wants to have a camera in their server room, and so you get these cheap Wyze cameras and stick them in there, right? So makes sense. Maybe for regulatory compliance, you've got to have it. So this checks the box. You got a camera in there, and off you go. Well, Wyze sent out a message to their customers letting them know that there would be maintenance done on February 8th, which is already passed. And in that note, they basically said, look, starting at 12 a.m. Pacific time, all Wyze cloud services will be off. And they'll be off until 2 a.m. So for a 2-hour period, Wyze is just turned off, which means you don't get notifications, recordings won't happen, no alerts or alarms will work. Basically, just everything shuts off for 2 hours. And to me, that is just an egregious thing to happen. Like, with the way that software is architected today, when should you ever have to shut off your entire platform?
I found that interesting as well. Like, they couldn't have done some sort of rolling maintenance window.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like the standard operating procedure nowadays, so that you don't have to shut down your entire platform. And if it's, I don't know, say a security system, maybe you don't want that to happen. Maybe you don't want that down. And then to send a love note to the attackers out there that would be like, so you're telling me from 12 to 2, all this is not on? Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. And so they made this announcement to their customers, but to Sophie's point, it's not like it was a secret at that point. It was an email. You could forward it to somebody. And so if somebody walked around the perimeter of your house and saw a Wyze camera, then they would know, like, okay, hey, here's a 2-hour window where I could potentially get into that home and not have to worry about the cameras.
Yeah.
That, to me, as a security company, Wyze should be thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, don't do a complete shutdown of your system. B, don't announce that to the world. You know, what? Give me some scenario, because I'm racking my brain here, Don. Give me a scenario why they would have done it this way, and that this was the best mode of operation.
So typically, this indicates a company that is not focused on software, right? So they're likely and I don't know this for certain, right? But likely a Chinese company that has a factory that churns out cameras, and so they can do that really, really inexpensively. And then they write software that's just the bare minimum to get the job done, right? Usually outsourced or whatever.
So they're following the IoT playbook.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the software is likely deployed in a single stack.
Yeah.
And they've been scaling up instead of scaling out. So as they get more customers, they add another CPU, they add some more RAM, they keep scaling up, but it's one system.
And now they're stuck.
And now they have to make some kind of change that's significant, and it's got to take the whole service off.
Gotcha.
Now, that's usually what this would indicate, or it's just a really, really bad architecture. Maybe they were changing domains or something, but even then, there's no reason you can't be pointed to 2 domains temporarily.
Yeah.
And there's planning and architecture that can happen here. So I have to assume that this is a single system. And it's scary sometimes. You hear about these companies that are offering cloud services, and in your mind you think, well, they must have a data center and all this massive infrastructure and whatever, and it turns out to be like 5 servers in somebody's closet, and that's it. Like, it's literally run out of a house.
Very reassuring.
It happens.
Well, that's why we read articles about, people invest in X, Y, or Z technologies and then they go bust, and now you have no support for that device. You spend a good bit of money in infrastructure, and you're kind of like just SOL.
Now, where it gets even trickier when it comes to security systems, I actually have done a lot of work for security system companies. And when I say security, I don't mean like pen testing. I mean actual
like physical security stuff.
Window monitors, key card access, and whatever. And for them, if you want to be a true monitoring company, you need to be UL rated or Underwriters Laboratories.
Okay.
When you buy electronics, you look for the UL rating on it to make sure it won't catch on fire. and that's why.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Well,
every time.
You can do that. So in this case, like with Wyze, it could be really tricky. They could have the cameras UL rated for just being an electronic device, but not UL rated to be full security monitoring capable and so on. It just tells me, like, I would not rely on a company like this to provide a
real
service.
robust security. Yeah.
Right. When you pay $30 a camera, there's somewhere that a cost savings occurred.
I'll put that on my garden shed or whatever, and
Yep.
The thing that would I don't use these cameras either, but the thing that would also worry me is that it sounds like this notice went out maybe a day or 2 before the maintenance was actually going to happen. That gives me no time. Like, oh, cool, my cameras and everything associated with them is just not going to work for 2 hours. Gives me no time for like a backup plan to take extra precautions. It's just good luck. Let's just hope that, probably nothing's going to happen.
Would you say that because they painted themselves into that corner of scaling up and not scaling out when they should have, they also painted themselves in the corner on how they had to tell their customers that they were going to be down?
I'm sure that's a good bit of it.
Like one domino knocked the other.
Yeah. And hey, if you're focused on the hardware and not the software, things like this are going to happen.
Right.
Cisco used to be like that back in the 90s. Oh, yeah, yeah. So Cisco was really focused on their hardware, like their switching hardware, and they outsourced all their software. And that's why, like, when you were in the iOS command line on a Cisco router or switch or whatever, it was super reliable. Everything worked. But the moment you flipped over to a GUI, it was this nightmare. This like Java hell. and it was because they would outsource it.
Yeah.
And one team would write version 1.0, and then a whole different team would write version 2.0, and it was just a nightmare. Their software was terrible, but their hardware was ultra reliable, right? That was what they focused on.
Gotcha.
So you kind of have to look at companies and gauge what they're focused on. Amazon makes Ring and all the Ring monitoring stuff. Well, they're focused on telemetry. They harvest your data.
Like Sidewalk and
they don't want to take their system offline for 2 hours because 2 hours of data they lose.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't have that.
They're not focused on the hardware. They're focused on the software. It's best to find somebody who's kind of balanced.
Yeah.
Can't have one without the other.
Yeah. All right, we beat this horse.
Yes.
What's next?
If I had these cameras, I'd be concerned, but I don't. So, up next, we're going to talk a little bit about who got pwned.
Looks like you're about to get pwned.
Fatality.
The iPad worked this time, so it's off of my list for now. So this article comes from Bleeping Computer. Hackers breach Reddit to steal source code and internal data. I did talk with somebody, I don't remember if it was Daniel or somebody else here a little bit earlier this week, but it sounds like basically they suffered a cyber attack by way of phishing, which I thought was fun. Not fun, but funny, a little funny. They clicked a link and something happened and people were able to harvest credentials or something. So hackers were able to access internal business systems and steal some internal documents and some source code, which is always a fun time for companies, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's never gone bad with that before, right?
No.
That's never been like a precursor to a bigger
Beach.
attack or nothing.
No.
We're in a really weird place in technology right now because for years, companies have been able to get away with kind of downplaying breaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean like Uber where they got
Like
really
lie
shady
things. Yeah.
But you could downplay it and say, well, they just accessed one account or they were only in there for a day, and people would give you the benefit of the doubt. We're beyond the benefit of the doubt period now, right? So when we hear
The honeymoon is over.
when we hear they just had access to one account and they only access some internal documents and some source code, just of something, we don't know, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do we interpret that now?
I hear change all my passwords.
You have to look at it the LastPass way.
Yeah.
This is what they're telling us today. Next week, it'll be a little more. Next week, it'll be more. And it turns out to be this full-blown thing, but they're drip feeding it out. And so I was really curious about this. I asked an auditor about it. Like, why do you think companies are dripping the news out? Because any PR person will tell you if you have bad news, you just need to get it all out as quickly as you can, because that means the faster you can move past it.
Right.
But if you drip the data out,
It makes it last longer.
yeah. So I was asking an auditor about it, and they said, well, GDPR compliance and several other regulations say you have to disclose in usually a 72-hour period or 48 hours. So you have a set period of time you have to disclose. And if it's really bad, you can do a big disclosure that's just of a little bit of data and then slowly grow it over time. And that was his reasoning for why they do that.
So you said these companies are just gaming the system.
I feel like they are. Well, LastPass definitely was.
Yeah.
Like with their Christmas announcement and
Yeah.
stuff like that, they were definitely gaming the system.
Yeah.
With Reddit, I don't know. It's a bit of a different story. I think
Well,
we don't really know
we'll
the details.
see, won't we?
Yeah.
Right. Because in the article, they're like they don't really go into a lot of details. They're saying those details are not available yet from Reddit. They're just letting us know that a breach happened. Here's what occurred. Here's the one thing I did learn, and I've kind of known this, but it just solidified it. Let me put it that way. What it solidified in my mind is if you listener out there and you're like, you know what, this cybersecurity thing sounds awesome. I want to be all about it, right? I'm going to be a part of it. I want to be a hacker. I want to do all you got to do is learn how to make a phishing email. That's all you got to do. Yeah. That's how it's done, ladies and gentlemen. You do not have to become some keyboard cowboy. You can just learn how to do phishing and get a cred harvesting site up. You're golden. You'll be into everything.
Yeah.
Right? Click a link, download the attachment. It's a good time. That's all it takes, because that's how it always goes.
Now, I did have an interesting takeaway on this one because they mentioned how they detected it, how they learned of the breach, right? And sometimes you hear about like, hey, we saw anomalous.
Anomalous. Yeah, anomalous.
Right word.
That's it.
I was like, did I say anonymous?
Yeah.
They see anomalous traffic on the network.
Yeah.
Or they see traffic on a weird port, or they see somebody post on an auction site about credentials. Like that's kind of how people detect things these days. Or maybe they used an IPS or something that detected it. But in this case, it was the user self-reporting. The user
That's right.
clicked on a link and realized they made a mistake and self-reported. And there have been a couple of breaches like this the last month or two where people have been self-reporting. And I think that's really an important thing to pay attention to. In the past, employees were not encouraged to self-report because they'd get fired. Like, hey, I'm sorry, I gave out my password.
Here's your reward.
You're fired.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're an IT security person, if you're a CISO or just responsible for IT security in your organization, this should be one of your jobs, is making sure that people are comfortable with self-reporting. We went through this with key cards in our building where we do the badge access to the building.
It's RFID.
And people would lose their badge and they wouldn't want to tell us about it. And because it's $50 a badge. So
Yeah.
it wasn't $50. We told them it was $50 because we figured that would make them not lose it, but they still would. And if they didn't,
It just made them lose it and not tell you.
there'd be a badge laying around somewhere.
Yeah.
And if somebody knew it was tied to our building, which Daniel, you remember the original badges had the company logo on it.
Yeah.
So that they knew where it went, and now they had access to the building. So we had to tell people like, hey, you're not in trouble if you lose your badge. You have to let us know so we can deactivate as soon as possible.
Remember what's his name left his wallet on top of the Uber ride or whatever,
yes.
and it was like in the middle of the street in front of the college.
Yep. Yeah, we've had a few interesting ones over the years, but I think that everybody is constantly under attack, and no matter how well trained you are, it is still possible to fall for phishing. So we need to be more active in teaching people to self-report.
Yeah.
To say if there's something fishy, please reach out to IT support and let us know, because no matter how sophisticated our systems are, this is something you've said over the years, Daniel, is for a defender, we have to defend against 100% of the attacks. But for an attacker, they only have to get one win, and that's it. So we're going to lose.
Yeah.
The defenders are going to
It's game
lose.
over, man.
They've got us demoralized.
They do have us demoralized.
And so we need people to recognize, I made a mistake. I'm not going to get fired. I might get chastised, but I need to report it so the company can take the appropriate action.
By the way, for Sophia, that was an Aliens reference. The movie Aliens.
Which is part 2.
Yeah, part 2.
Great. Okay, they've given me a list. Of
Yes. Just a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Every week I get new movies I need to watch. Can't say I'm gonna watch Alien or Aliens. I don't.
You're
know.
fired.
That's-
Get out.
Yeah, actually, I think that
It's in our contract, right?
I'm pretty sure we can terminate
It's-
people on that one.
Yeah.
Probably can. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
nice knowing you. Nice knowing you all. Thanks for letting me be part of
The
your life.
last episode that we see Sophia.
Yeah. They won't even mention it. I'll just disappear.
No.
Be in the news. Okay, well, yeah, that's definitely interesting to hear about that from Reddit. It's a website that I have used in the past, and I love seeing that when it's a website that I'm like, oh, I'm active on that website, and there's security problems. Great, that's great.
Yeah, a couple of people use Reddit according to Google.
A couple of people use Reddit.
Let's see what they're ranked at. They're in the top 10, right?
Or close to it, at least.
Not according to this list.
So maybe after this, they've dropped
Wait,
out.
am I just overlooking it? I believe Reddit is in the top 10. This website cannot be accurate.
Yeah,
Reddit is
because
the
it's
top
not there at
100.
all.
Yeah,
We really are doing the media's job.
Yeah.
I know.
I don't like this source, therefore it's inaccurate.
Yeah,
That's
obviously.
right.
It's wrong.
I will find a source.
That's
That's
right.
what I'm saying.
Where is echochamber.com?
Where are my facts?
But they absolutely have millions upon millions of users, people that go there every single day. So they have a lot of data. Although I don't know if anybody really puts sensitive data on Reddit. So it's probably the best case scenario.
I wouldn't make that bet, Don.
No.
No.
I'm being
They just
naive.
they put their life story on Reddit.
Listen,
they just change the
man,
name.
people do like some really not smart things in a public forum a lot.
Yeah.
Speaking of not smart things, according to Wikipedia, the reliable source, Reddit is the 19th most visited site as of January 2023. So a lot of users.
Oh,
Gotcha.
Wikipedia must be true.
I know. And I can't see if this is cited or not. It looks like an uncited number, too. So this is potentially completely made up, but you heard it here first on Technado.
It did say that it was mostly, I think, employee contact information. But again, like you said with the LastPass thing, it's like,
That's
who
what they
knows
said,
what
yeah.
we'll find out next week.
Yep.
Reddit may
Yeah.
be featured again, and let's hope not.
I wonder if there's going to be a subreddit about Reddit's.
yeah. It'll just be people fighting.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Downvote.
/r, we're screwed.
Well, before we take off here, just a couple quick things. Technado is sponsored by ACI Learning and IT Pro. So if you are watching from the Technado website, you'll see that big orange button that says sponsored by. You can click on that to go to the IT Pro website. If you want to support the podcast, check out their courses. It's pretty cool. You can use the promo code Technado30 if you want to get a discount on your IT Pro membership. So check that out. And if you can't get enough, you can check out some ACI Learning's webinars and some live on social events, which are pretty new there. They've got webinar recordings available at itpro.tv/webinars. Got one coming up in March. I think we've talked about it with Mike Saunders. I think Daniel might be participating in that potentially.
I might be there.
Yeah, if he decides to come in to work that.
If I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good.
And then those live on social events, they had one last week that was about Splunk. This week they had one with Mr. Chris Ward, and I think he had a guest, Mark Bradley, talking about some people search stuff. So if you're interested in that.
That's a very hot topic right now.
It is.
Yes.
It is. So if you are interested in that, you can check that out on their YouTube. That'll live there for a while. And then IT Pro has some new courses coming out this quarter. I think some Splunk stuff maybe coming out this week or next week with Anthony Sequeira. So check those out. And lastly, we've got International Women's Month coming up in March, and ACI Learning is going to be dropping some interviews with some pretty cool women in, I think, audit, cyber, and IT, because ACI, there you go, makes sense, sticking to their name. So you can check those out, some phenomenal women that they're going to be interviewing and talking about there, and that'll be in March. So just keep an eye on their socials, on their website. Lots of cool stuff coming up at ACI. But for us, I think, unless you have any parting thoughts...
I have no thoughts.
No thoughts at all. No thoughts at all. That is great.
Completely empty up here.
They wore themselves out. So, so thank you for joining us for another episode of Technado. We'll see you next time.